In this video lesson, we'll discuss the Civil War and the role of different soldiers and women in the war. Filling the ranks was definitely something that both sides had to deal with. The North allowed blacks to enlist, but did not allow them to fight. By 1863, after the Emancipation Proclamation, the pressure was on to allow African American units to train and fight. They were killed in greater numbers and paid less for their efforts. Wealthy people in both the North and the South could pay a substitute to take their place in the army. Conscription, which is forced military service, was first used in the South because they needed soldiers more desperately. The North will actually begin conscription in 1862. This is a graphic that will show the size of the Union forces. They had total draftees, people who were drafted into military service, about 46,000. Substitutes that were paid by other people was 118,000. They also had difficulty with desertions, which meant people that left the military service before their time was up. They had a total of 200,000 desertions. 80,000 of them were caught and returned. Total deaths, 360,000. Total battle wounds, 110,070. And total dying by disease is 249,930. So as you can see, especially here in this number, not all of the soldiers died because of battle injuries. A lot of times they died because of disease and infection from battle wounds that were not treated as well as they could be. The Confederate forces we can also compare, as their total size was 800,000. They had 120,000 drafted and 70 substitutes. 104 desertions, 21,000 of them being returned. A total of 260,000 deaths, 94 deaths from battle wounds, and 166,000 from disease or infection. Slaves could not help the Southern Army fight, but they were used for manual labor and to continue to keep the plantations running. The Civil War was called a rich man's war, but a poor man's fight, because the rich plantation owners did not fight the war. Mostly poor farmers in the South were the men that were fighting. Conscription, or drafted military service, was so resisted in the North that riots even broke out, especially among the Irish, because the Irish felt that they didn't want the slaves to be freed, because if they were freed, then they would come north and they would compete with the Irish for jobs, and the Irish did not want to have that type of competition. It became especially violent after the Emancipation Proclamation, exactly for those reasons. Desertion was a common problem on both sides, with over 300,000 soldiers leaving their troops. Because states offered a signing bonus, many men enlisted in one particular state and then stayed for a little while and then deserted and then enlisted in another state someplace else, collected the money, and then deserted, and then went to another state somewhere else and collected the money and then deserted. And so this was an ongoing problem because they weren't able to track people the way that we can track people today. By the end of the war, the South was so short of men that they were openly enlisting young boys. Women could not openly enlist, but some disguised themselves as men and fought alongside their husbands the entire war. Others became spies, nurses, and cooks to be able to support the war effort. Elizabeth Blackwell, America's first female physician, helped run the U.S. Sanitary Commission. Clara Barton tended to the wounded and founded the American Red Cross, which basically is, a lot of their methods are still the battlefield strategies and medical procedures that she put into place during the Civil War. Although hundreds of men and women tended to the sick and injured, more soldiers died from illness and infection than of battle wounds. More often, women took over men's civilian jobs while they were gone to war. We'll discuss more the role of women and the actual experience of the soldiers fighting on both sides when we discuss our lessons in class.